Hello and welcome to Morgan and Bookland. I am so excited about today's episode. I have been thinking about this one for a while and trying to come up with the best books, and ultimately it's like taking me forever. So I was like, I'm just going to go with what I have as opposed to try to make it perfect. So today's episode is the books I recommend for those of you who are huge fans of Bridgerton but also like fantasy romance. So these are books that, while fantasy romance, they have those like Bridgerton high society longing vibes. So excited. I have 4 books for you today, and then one that's like a whole legit series. That the entire series, it's a series of interconnected standalones that all have that Bridgerton-esque feel. So excited for this today. Let's dive in. Okay, so the first one on my list, and I'll do this one first because I actually do have the book. It is A Kiss of Iron by Clare Sager. We all know I'm not good at pronunciation, so it's this one, this bad boy right here. Look at that. That is like, it's a significant amount of pages. It's a big book. It's like, how many pages is this? 600 something? Close to 600, which is good. I would not recommend this as a beach read because I kind of think, when I think of Bridgerton-esque books, I think of things that probably would be like really fun on the beach. I also think of things that feel like standalones, which kind of makes sense because the series, while every season follows a different sister, a different sibling. This is intense, but it's really good. So this book is about a noble woman who, she is married. Her husband has like run them into debt. She hasn't seen her husband literally in years, I think, and she's just paying off all his debts. He's a gambler and people keep coming to her door, and she does everything she can. She actually thieves to be able to pay off the debts, which is a really interesting twist and feel to this book. And then she randomly gets called into court. So the thing that's a little different about this one, and some of the books do have this feel, because there is a slight difference. So Bridgerton takes place, I think it's called the Regency era in society, like high society, where this is more king and queen still. And obviously there's a queen in Bridgerton, but this one I think feels just a little older than Bridgerton itself, but it still has that same court intrigue, like the dynamics between how people interact with each other is very similar to the Bridgerton world, even though I do think this is a little bit older. Almost like, it kind of reminds me at times also is like The Other Boleyn Girl, if you ever read that, which is based on a true story. So it's kind of closer to that time period, but still has Bridgerton vibes because of the longing and the romance and the witty banter, I would say, and also just in terms of how people in society interact with each other. But essentially, it's this noble woman who's going penniless, hasn't seen her husband for years. She is called into court to be a spy because this is a mix of humans and fae. The fae, there's 2 monarchs in the fae world, and they live like a continent over or something like that. And there's a king and a queen, and the queen has this person, it's kind of like her right-hand man, the queen's shadow, they call him, who is coming to court to represent the night queen. And the one of the reasons why is because the human queen, she is getting married, and it's kind of almost, it's weird. I feel like if this author wrote another book, it'd be interesting to follow the queen, and it'd almost be like a Bachelor-esque type vibe. So basically the queen invited all kinds of high nobles from all over the world, including the fae, to court her, essentially, because there's this weird situation where the monarchs are supposed to have a touch of magic because they come from a fae line, but this queen has no magic. So there's a lot of pressure for her to marry someone with magic, which is where the Night Queen's shadow, this like right hand, like kind of like her general, or he's not a general in the military, but her right hand man comes, and for some reason they want to spy on him. So we don't really know. We do find out in the book why this random borderline penniless noblewoman who hasn't been to court in years, why she's the one called in. But of course there's a love story. There's also a mystery, which is super fun. Like there's people getting murdered. And so she's a spy. They're also trying to solve this mystery. It's a fake dating situation. She ends up in a fake dating situation with the Night Queen Shadow, who she's supposed to be spying on. And it has a lot of mystery-esque vibes, but the reason why it feels like Bridgerton to me is because of the witty banter banter and the romance. I will say it is a slow burn. It gets spicier towards the end. And there's 2 books out. The 3rd book, I believe, is coming out. So it's May now. It's coming out next month in June. I do not know if this will be a trilogy or if there's going to be more. It will make sense to be a trilogy. It feels like a trilogy, kind of where the story's been going. It feels like it could really close out nicely in a 3rd book. So I'm hoping it's only a trilogy. The 2nd book is a lot spicier, I would say, and the 2nd book also takes place in the Fae part of the world, but still has those Bridgerton-esque vibes. So very long story short, because I spent so much time on this book, A Kiss of Iron by Clare Sager. We'll go with that. Do recommend this. I will say, though, look at hearts are treacherous things leading us down dangerous paths. Oh, love it. Not a beach read. This is an intense read. It's very thick, and it, like, every page is purposeful, I would say. Like, sometimes you get books that are like 600 pages and you're like, ugh, this drags. A lot goes on in this book, and I actually put off reading this for a very long time because of the fact I saw how many pages it was, and it wasn't, when I read something that's like a court type of book, or like high society, I kind of feel like it can't move quickly. And so when I see a book with 600 pages in court life, I'm like, oh, that feels like it's going to drag. But it doesn't, because I think the murder mystery keeps it going. The fact that they kind of have forced proximity because they're fake dating in a way, it keeps it going. It is very interesting, and I do recommend it. So that's A Kiss of Iron. Next on my list, which I don't have the book. So Kiss of Iron, also, I do want to point out too, this is also available on Kindle Unlimited last time I checked. I try to recommend Kindle Unlimited books, because also if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, 9 times out of 10, even if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, it's still a more affordable book if you had to pay for it. We're talking like $2.99 to $5.99 type of situation, but this is on Kindle Unlimited as of now, I would say. Next book is another Kindle Unlimited. I love this author. Her name is Lisette Marshall. It is Curse of the Thorn King. This book is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I'm a huge fairy tale retelling person, so apologies there if you're not. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It is basically about a lady in society who she has taken upon herself to like poison and kill awful men. It started out where I think someone in her household was being abused by a man, and she kind of had to stick up for herself and the woman who was being abused. And so I think maybe she's called the Black Widow or something. She's not a widow at all, but I think they have like a nickname for her. But she's a lady in high society who murders other people. She's on her own. I think maybe she was an orphan situation or something like that. But she does want to raise up in society and be like a real actual lady in society. And she's having trouble because of the fact that she had such a rough upbringing and is having trouble kind of assimilating and getting higher in the ranks. And she does at one point get caught murdering someone. She's either caught murdering someone or she was like thievery. I'm not quite sure, but essentially we don't quite understand why. We kind of find out a little bit later on in the books, but in the book, I would say. But she then is tasked, we will not execute you. You can enter society and be a true lady if you kill the legendary Fae King. So she's like, okay, cool. So she's trying to be a lady. She's trying to like have all the manners, but she's also a killer now. She's tasked with killing to then re-enter society fully and correctly, which is quite interesting. So she goes to kill the Thorn King, which again is the beast-like character in this scenario, and she gets trapped in the house. This is one thing too. I find Beauty and the Beast retellings fascinating because it is the true definition in my mind of forced proximity, except for a couple books where like there's a book called Tethered. It's a vampire book where they literally cannot be apart for like more than 20 feet or something like that, because it's forced proximity, and so they're always together. They are literally locked in a castle. Like the castle will not let them leave, so they can't even like go outside. Like I think they can go outside a little bit to some extent, maybe in the garden or something, but they are locked, and it's just the two of them. While it's an enchanted castle, there aren't other talking characters, and I think the author does a really good job at carrying the book through and making it interesting with two characters constantly interacting and learning more about each other. So that was really fun. It is a standalone, but she's writing more books, and by the end of this book, you can kind of tell where she's going and who the most likely next lead character is going to be. But it's just fun. Like I said, it definitely has a high society feel. like she wants to be this lady but really struggles with it, and lots of wit and banter between the two of them. Definitely not interested in each other, and then slowly grow to be interested in each other. But highly recommend Curse of the Thorn King by Lisette Marshall. If you recognize that name from me before, she is the author of A Court of Blood and Bindings series. I think that's what it's called, right? Yes, I was right. Whew, sorry, I haven't gotten enough sleep lately, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. So, a court of A Court of Blood and Bindings series. I think it's called the Fae Isle series, something like that, which just completed. So she kind of has a broad range of things, because this definitely is that Regency era high society feel where her other books are not. But really enjoyed it and highly recommend it. Okay. Next up on my list is, I'm trying to pick which one I want to go with next. I'm going to go with How to Fake It with a Fae by Amy Boyles. This book was such a pleasure to read. This book I read it last month in April, and I was looking for something lighthearted. I usually, if I read a series, I then need a standalone or something different, especially something lighthearted I look for, and this popped up. Again, this is a Kindle Unlimited book, so is Curse of the Thorn King, excuse me, let me go back to that real quick. That one is also Kindle Unlimited. This one is as well. Amy Boyles, it was just so fun to read. And this is one, too, where I would recommend. This is like a perfect beach read. And it is probably the closest in similarities to the Bridgerton world of the books that it's one of the two. There's two recommendations I'm giving. This is one that are really as close as I think you can get while staying true to fantasy romance and being different. You're not being totally copycat. But with this book, it is going to be a series of interconnected standalones, and I think there's 7 sisters who are their witches. So you have humans, you have witches, and then you have fae. And so this is a series, it's a family of, I think, 7 female witches, and in order for the magic, because it comes from witch, a lot of witch books, the magic comes from the mother side, so it's a matriarchal family, I would say. So in order to keep when the grandmother dies, and then the mothers die, I'm not saying they die in the book, but eventually when people die, in order to keep the magic going through the generations, you need to get married and have children. If you don't get married, the magic, so if you are a woman in a witch family and you don't get married, your magic dies with you, and so your generations become less powerful. So there's a lot of pressure for, I think it's 7 sisters to get married, and so that's kind of the premise behind what happens in this book. But it starts out, so this is a little interesting because it does start out in modern day society with a witch who has no power. So she has a hard time dating, and then of course getting married because no one wants to be with her because she doesn't have power. Because part of, if you think about in the Bridgerton society, you want to marry high because that's just better. This is a kind of very similar vibe. No one really wants her because she doesn't have power. And while she comes from a very powerful family, she doesn't have power. So she goes through some interesting heartbreak in the beginning, and then she is called home. So she's living in regular modern day society, but where it takes a turn to get that Bridgerton feel is the place where they live. I think it's in Louisiana. It's based in, I can't quite remember. So it is in America essentially, but the vibe at home is very different. So the vibe at home is that Bridgerton, Regency era high society type of feel. So she goes from wearing jeans, and there's even multiple comments where she's like, I just want to wear my jeans, or this outfit is way too itchy, and that is really fun. I laughed multiple times throughout this book. But they throw a first ball for her to dance with people to find someone to court, and then they're trying to marry her off, and she, in a twist of fate, gets bonded accidentally to a member of Fae Society, and so it is forced proximity and fake dating because they agree to kind of he's in a situation where he needs to be seen dating and she does too, so they kind of agree. Great. It's very similar actually to the first Bridgerton book, The Duke and I, or something like that. I can't remember the exact name. Where they kind of agree, okay, we're going to let this play out. We're going to pretend to kind of appease our parents and, not feel forced from a time perspective. But it is super fun. It's very whimsical. The magic is whimsical. There's balls. Again, it's going to be standalones, and you can already see but you meet the other sisters in the book. So I think we'll definitely see recurring characters for sure. But highly recommend. I laughed. It's not not a huge book. It's free on Kindle Unlimited, and her next book is coming out, I believe, in August or November. So this is the first book of the whole series. So it's a newer series, but the second one is coming out relatively soon. I think so, end of the summer, early fall. But highly recommend the How to Fake It with a Fae by Amy Boyles. Okay. Next up on my list, slightly different course from the traditional fantasy romance, because I know when I think of fantasy romance, a lot of people associate the fantasy romance with fae, and this one's different. So I will say I think all of them so far had fae, that fae type of magic. This one is different. And it's very well known. It is the Belladonna by Adalyn Grace. She has her second book out as well called Foxglove, and her third book, Wisteria, is coming out, I think, later this year. I think it's a November release. I'm not quite sure. But the one particularly I want to talk about is Belladonna. However, Foxglove, the second book, does totally have these same vibes. But if you've watched one of my other videos, you know I was slightly disappointed by Foxglove. So I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, it's so great, when I didn't think it was that great. I'm still going to complete the series, but Belladonna, definitely worth a read, and you can end it there. There's a mild, tiny cliffhanger at the end, but it's more like to introduce the next story that's going to happen, but the story of Belladonna does come to a closure, essentially, in the same book, and while you still have the same characters in the next book, it is kind of a new story, so it's not like this huge cliffhanger where you need to read the next book to finish out what's going to happen with the story. You do kind of have that conclusion, which is nice. But Belladonna is about a woman who, when she was born, her entire family was poisoned, but somehow she lived. So she grew up an orphan, going from family member to family member, but she can't die, essentially. So poison has no effect on her. She doesn't get ill. She also has seen death and has met him, and she can see people who have died, especially shortly after they die. But as in her childhood, she kept getting passed around because people around her were dying. And then people started getting wary about taking her on because it was kind of weird. And so this book begins essentially with her in her last home. And she's a lady, like she's old. She still needs a place to live. I think she's 18, 19, something like that. And, at that point in time, women are still living at home until they're married off, essentially. So she needs a home to go to because she's not married off. And she wants to be part of high society too. And she is, like, her family, her mother and her father, they were very high society. They were very rich. Like, she is about to inherit when she comes fully of age, like this giant estate. So she's very wealthy. But she has her mom. She's grown up with her mom's. One of the things that she got from her mom or got from her old house is like a book on how to be a proper lady and teaching herself etiquette. The dance cards, I think, are a thing in this book that you see in like Bridgerton. Very, very high society-esque, but it's also very gothic. So the interesting thing is in this book, the love interest is Death himself, which is quite fascinating. There's also a mystery vibe to it, which really keeps the plot going. Someone is trying, so she is in her new family, and she came to the family after one of the family members had died. So no one can blame her on it, but another family member is very, very sick. And so she is trying to figure out what is going on. And because she has this connection to death, and what she does is, since she can't die, she takes Belladonna, which is a poisonous plant, which kind of puts her in this almost like ghost-like state where she can talk to death and interact with death. It's really fascinating, and it's super fun. It's very well done. Like I said, it's a mystery, very much high society. Like, she goes on dates, like she's trying to find a husband so she can really enter society that way. Very, very, very good, very fun. I will say it drags a little bit. Sometimes I felt like it was a little slow, but I really did enjoy it. So that is Belladonna by Adalyn Grace. Okay, last on my list, it is a full series. I don't think all the books are out yet. It is the Entangled with the Fae series. That sounds so smutty, but it's not. I mean, there's definitely spicy scenes, don't get me wrong, but it's not like a smut series. But Entangled with the Fae, I'll put the books here for you, the ones that I've read. I think there are 4 or 5 out. I think there's 5 out. I've read 3 of them. So they are interconnected standalones. Technically, there is an order to them, because how it happens is, you probably see with a lot of standalones, is when you're writing one book, you bring in the next book's character as a very minor character. So then by the time you get to book 2, you're kind of familiar with that character a little bit. So there is technically an order to read them in, but I did technically read them out of order a little bit. Like, I read the last book without reading books 3 and 4, I think. And I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. But highly recommend the series. It is so fun. I have a really hard time picking my favorite out of the 3 that I read. So let me explain it a little bit. It is there was this land, and the Fae came, and the Fae like owned the land, had the land a while, and it has like the Seelie and the Unseelie. Every area, every province has a Seelie and an Unseelie monarch. So kind of like dark Fae, light Fae in a way, kind of thing. And then humans started coming in and kind of taking over. And way back when, the Fae had animal forms or different forms, but they eventually adapted to take on human forms to mimic more like humans. And now we're in a time and age in a very similar like Regency era, high society type feel, where the Fae really hold on to their human forms, and some switch into other animal forms. And there's definitely magic, but that's not as important. It's not like a Court of Thorns and Roses type of situation. It's way more about society and the politics and what's going on there. But I read I think it's called The Curse of the Wolf King, Heart of the Raven Prince, and A Dream So Wicked. I liked Curse of the Thorn King. It got a little, like, I thought it made me laugh, and it was so good. But basically that one was about our main character. She just wants to get a job. She doesn't really want to be married off. She wants to be independent. And she goes to get a job, and on the process of getting that job, she's like kidnapped, because she's actually with these Fae kidnap her, and it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, because they're all fairy tale retelling. So he's cursed, and he's trying to break the curse, and part of the curse is you have to fall in love, right? Shocking, it's Beauty and the Beast. And so she agrees to help bring him up into be more modern, in terms of be a true high Fae lord, essentially, and have a ball and have the dance cards and have proper etiquette. So that is super fun. I think my favorite, though, is the Cinderella retelling, which is Heart of a Raven Prince. We do meet our main heroine in the first book, but she is kind of, it was a situation where she should have been the favored child, and then her father died, so it is like her step-parents that took her over and are like eating into her inheritance and have taken advantage of her. And she ends up kind of a maid in the prince's house, hiding out there, and pretend, I don't want to go too much, because that one's very easily to ruin and give plot points away, but I think saying it's a Cinderella retelling kind of gives enough. And then the last one, A Dream So Wicked, is the Sleeping Beauty retelling. And I will say, when I went to read this, I was like, please don't tell me the main character is going to be asleep for like 90% of the book. And she wasn't. I can say that there if you're worried about that. I avoid Sleeping Beauty retellings because of that. I feel like it'd be weird, but there isn't a sleepiness. But all of these books have the dance cards and the high society and people wanting to be, move up in society and find matches and helping people find matches. And it's so in line with everything that we've seen in Bridgerton so far, in terms of all 3 seasons, I would say. Highly recommend this. These are also Kindle Unlimited, which is wonderful. And perfect beach reads too, I would say. They're light, they're fun, they're a little, I don't think they're super long, but they are standalones, so you can read them in any order that you want. Like I said, there kind of is one that probably would be recommended, but they're just so fun. They make me so happy, and I highly recommend it. Because one thing, like, Bridgerton doesn't necessarily make me laugh. Sometimes it does, but it's not known for comedy. But one of the things that I like about these books is that they do evoke genuine emotion from me. Because sometimes I think when I think of books like Bridgerton, my mind goes more in the Jane Austen type of route, and as much as I love that type of writing, sometimes I can find it boring, and this writing captures that high society while also being fun to read and having witty banter, and really doing a good job writing the longing between the characters and the romance, while keeping the fantasy elements minimal. Where the fantasy elements, I would say, come into play to all of the books I gave today, it really just explains who the person is and creates another dynamic from a political standpoint. It's not that magic is very heavily used, I would say, in any of these books. I would say it's minimally used. It's just a part of life. It's not this huge big deal. But that's it. I hope you please read these, and then when you do, let me know what you think. And also, more importantly, because I'm obsessed with Bridgerton and fantasy romance, as you can tell, if you have any other fantasy romance recommendations that like evoked the feelings of Bridgerton, please drop those in the comments. So one, I can read them, and two, everyone else can see them. But thank you, and I will see you next time.